Well, for more on Johnson & Johnson's earnings and its outlook, I'm joined by Bruce Turkel in Miami. Bruce is an entrepreneur, speaker, and an author. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Now, let's start with some background on the company's history. How did it grow to become the name in personal care products, as well as other medical devices and goods?
Well, it's done so many things in all of its history, and if you go through all of them, you'll see that it's pretty much done everything right. It's figured out how to dominate lots of sectors that might be slow growing, but generate very powerful loyalty amongst its consumers. They've only had 9 CEOs and I believe 121 years of operation, so they've had a very steady hand on the tiller. They create incredible amounts of cash. Last year, they put away $11 to $16 billion in cash, and they're able to use this money to buy specific positions in the areas they want. They have 250 subsidiaries, which means they can generate business, but they can also get rid of slow-performing subsidiaries without really having a big effect on their bottom line. They really have figured out how to do it right. They're considered one of the best managed companies in the world, and in fact, Standard & Poor's rates them with Microsoft as some of the best and lowest risk investments anywhere.
Well, Bruce, I'm sure that money will certainly come in handy given the company's legal troubles. Now, at some counts, there are at least 11,000 pending lawsuits tied to this alleged asbestos-tinged baby powder, and that's aside from judgments already going against the company. So talk about the lawsuits tied to Johnson & Johnson products and what's happening so far.
Well, here's what happens. When these things are discovered, companies have a choice. They can say, yes, there's a problem and we're going to deal with it, or, as they said in the Godfather movie, they can go to the mattresses. They can say, absolutely not, there's no problem, and then that invites lawsuits. And as you pointed out, they have a very large number of lawsuits. But what's even worse is people are now discovering the things in memos where they talked about how they're going to avoid problems, specifically that rather than deal with the issues, rather than face them head on, they're going to go after markets and audiences that they thought would be perhaps less educated about the problem and, in fact, more likely to purchase their products. And by doing that, they further committed to both selling products that might, in fact, have problems and to ultimately inviting more lawsuits. So now those lawsuits continue to add up. And here's the worst part from a PR point of view. If you have medical lawsuits, people are concerned, but they tend to be rather niche-oriented.
Right.
But when you talk about asbestos in talc which is usually put on babies, there is nobody who has any sympathetic or empathetic feeling for that. And really, that sort of word and having that word out there can destroy your brand across a number of different fronts.
So, Bruce, to that point then, obviously people primarily associate Johnson & Johnson, as you mentioned, with baby products, the most vulnerable members of society. So what sort of efforts is the company making, or can it make, to really regain that trust from a lot of concerned parents?
Well, what efforts are it making and what efforts can it make are actually two very smart but very different questions. What effort is it making? Is it stonewalling? I mean, they have taken out ads, full-page ads in the Wall Street Journal, in the New York Times. They fund a nonprofit site called factsabouttalc.com, where they talk about the fact that, in fact, their products are not detrimental. That's what they are doing. What they could do? Well, I think you have to decide, or they have to decide, A, are the products causing damage? And B, are the products causing damage to their bottom line? Because as you pointed out, babies are the most vulnerable of consumers, and it's very hard to overcome the belief that you're hurting babies. And once again, if they get known for that, that will become a corrosive brand message that starts to eat into their brand value across the board. So that brings up your second question. I want to make sure that we get to this issue. We know that there really has been a shift in the industry in terms of consumers being more educated, whether it's online or through social media, and really seeking out cleaner, safer products. What does this mean for some of these legacy brands, and what does this mean for some of these newer brands like Jessica Alba's Honest Company trying to claw some of that market share away? Well, it used to be that if you had a problem with a brand, what could you do? You could write a letter to the company, and they'd apologize, and they'd send you a coupon. And effectively, that was it. In the old world, read before the internet, before the democratization of information, before social media, companies could talk to us. We really couldn't talk back. Now anybody with a smartphone and a data plan and some followers can put the word out there. And often these followers have more influential position with customers than the companies do. And so it's critical that a company like Johnson & Johnson needs to nip this in the bud. It was critical that Volkswagen did it with their Dieselgate, and it's critical that every company does it, because you and I and every other consumer now can tell the world what we think. And if they want to do that, it's a very simple, not simplistic, and easy to understand, but not easy to do program. It's only 4 steps. Number 1, you accept the problem. So far, they haven't done that. They haven't said, we have a problem. Instead, they fought it. Number 2, you acknowledge the problem. Here's what happened. Here's why it happened. Number 3, you apologize sincerely and effectively. And by the way, an apology that's followed with the word but or if, as in, I'm sorry, but, or I'm sorry if you thought, is not an apology. That's an excuse.
Right.
And step 4, you act. You immediately do something to prove to consumers that they can trust you. Tylenol is the classic example. It's the master class. When Tylenol bottles were contaminated with poison, Tylenol didn't make excuses. They accepted it. They acknowledged it. They apologized, and then they acted. They took every bottle of Tylenol off the shelves around the entire United States.
Right.
They didn't only do it in the markets where it was happening. They didn't say, well, we checked serial numbers. They took them all off. They created the full...
Well, we'll have to see, Bruce, if Johnson & Johnson end up changing tack. Unfortunately, we do have to run out of time there. Thank you so much, entrepreneur, speaker, and author Bruce Turkel.